The UX 360 Research Summit Europe 2026 is back for its 6th edition in Berlin on the 23rd and 24th of June. UX 360 Europe is one of Europe's leading events dedicated to advancing UX research as a strategic and business driving function. The summit brings together global speakers, practical case study, and actionable frameworks focused on the full research journey, from planning and execution to stakeholder alignment and business impact. Attendees can expect sessions on cutting-edge strategy, real-world return on investment, and the evolving role of research in today's organization. I will be there as well, and if you work in UX research, design, or product, this is truly one of the unmissable UXR events in Europe. And as a listener of the UX Research Club podcast, you get 15% off on your ticket with the code UXRC15, UXRC15. All the information will be in the note of this podcast. Hello everybody and welcome. This is Emmanuel and you are listening to the UX Research Club, the podcast that is dedicated to the rising field of user research. Who is the show for? It is for everyone actually. Everyone interested in UX, product development, digital transformation. Whether you are working for a large organization or for a startup, this podcast is for you. I would like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to the UX Research Club all around the world. I can really see the increase of downloads every week, which is great. So thank you, all of you. So, as you can see, we are reaching the end of season 1 very soon, 10 episodes per season. So I'm glad to say that all your support and messages motivates me to carry on with the podcast. And I'm pleased to announce that I'm starting to plan the season 2. If you want to continue supporting the UX Research Club, so please give me some stars, review, or even share it with your network. That would be amazing. So this week, a special clin d'œil, so wink to Brian Morrow, Samantha Arbison, and Bianca Darwish. Thank you for your messages. And for people who are in London and in the UK, the UX Research Social will meet up. Actually, it's not the UX Research Social, that's the User Research Social, by the way. We'll meet up next Thursday on the 9th of February after work near Southwark Station. So people who are interested, you can ping me on LinkedIn or send me an email on info@uxresearchclub.com and we can add you to the WhatsApp group. In the autumn last year, I was fortunate enough to be invited as a guest speaker at the UX Crunch in London. It was the second event in person that I did since the COVID, and actually it was super nice to do a talk again in front of people in person and to meet some of the UX London community. I got some great feedback regarding the talk on wellness aspect of user research, and some researchers told me after my talk that they realized that they were not on their own and felt less isolated and understood after listening to me. Being a UX researcher is not always easy, but as mentioned in the episode 7 on the role of the UX researcher, it is evident that we don't have much breathing space. A role can be challenging, especially because there is a lack of understanding of what we do. We are not designers. We are UX researchers, which require completely different skill set. I never say it enough. We, as UX researchers, use scientific research methods to evaluate and understand who are the users, what are their needs, and how end users interact with your digital product and services. Having experienced myself some challenges through my career, such as exhaustion, lack of understanding of what we do, and battle to make people understand that designers are not researchers. Design and research are two different disciplines. I realize that someone has to say it loud, that researchers are struggling. This is why today's episode is on how it is and why it is essential to look after your UX researcher well-being. I will start with some numbers related to UX researcher well-being. They are a bit scary, to be honest. Then I will raise the issue of why they are struggling and what are the reasons, which will be followed by what we can do to ease the work life of the UX researchers. And finally, I will give you some activity that may help you to cope with the struggle. So let's start with some numbers. The sources and the references of all those numbers will be in the description of this podcast. So from 1983 to 2017, the profession grew from 1,000 to 1 million UXer, meaning people working in user experience, which is a lot. From 2017 to 2050, there is an estimate that actually the field of UX is going to grow by 100 million, which is a lot. Could you just imagine 100 million UXer, which is huge, keeping in mind this profession didn't exist before. In 2020, researcher to design ratio is 1 researcher for 5 designers. And also the ratio from designer to developer is 1 designer for 10 developers. So as you can see, if you got a team of 50 developers, you will have 5 designers and then only 1 researcher. So you can just imagine the amount of work that the researcher may have. Also, one thing which just emerged, which is quite interesting, is the search of the word user research has risen by 4.25 times in the last 10 years. You've got 15 online communities devoted specifically to user research at the moment, and they keep growing. You've got, 15 online communities, it's one will have more than thousands of users or thousands of followers. There is currently 54 full-time jobs with the keywords of user research. And 70,000 people have a job title that is using user research, which probably will continue to increase in the next few years. Moving to stress. 3 in 5 employees reporting negative impact of work-related stress, which is a lot actually. 85% of UX researcher or user researcher say they are struggling with their mental well-being, which is huge. It's 4.25 out of 5. This is more than the average of other profession. 77% of those, 85% of researchers said that it will affect their ability to do their work. Those numbers are something, don't you think? Actually, when I started looking at those numbers, I couldn't believe it. And to be honest, I'm a bit concerned that many researchers are not feeling well. This is why I think it is important to let the UX community, the product management, and the industry to know about it. Stress undermines burnout. And if we don't make the well-being and the mental health of a UX researcher an urgent priority, the consequences for the UX researcher will be dramatic. I know that a lot of people are looking forward to transition to the world of UX research, but I want to say that passion, commitment to deliver valuable insight, time pressure, lack of resources, etc., will definitely have an impact on the UX research well-being. Before we start, I want to make sure that everyone that is listening today, especially the UX researcher, that if you are experiencing the following symptoms, lack of ability to focus, increased of avoidance, feeling unappreciated, lack of motivation, performance issues, feeling exhausted, and difficulty sleeping, there may be some undermining of the symptom of a burnout. So if you start having some of those symptoms, please call your GP and get some help. This is very important. So now, what is important to understand is why researchers are struggling, why are they stressed out, and why their well-being is affected. What are the causes? So the first reason why UX researchers are stressed out is due to their workload. If you have listened to the last episode on the role of the UX researcher, you will see that the UX researcher do not have much breathing space with all the tasks that are part of the UX research role. Furthermore, when you look at the numbers mentioned earlier, The ratio of designer to UX researcher is 5 designers to 1 researcher and 1 researcher to 50 developers. You can see automatically the issue. Let me give you an example. If you have 5 designers in your organization and 1 researcher, the 5 designers will work on 5 different design projects. How do you expect, if you have only 1 researcher, to manage all the research across the 5 projects? And if one of your projects is using agile methodology process, let's say 10 weeks to provide an MVP in 5 sprints. Generally, when you work in an agile environment and you integrate a user researcher to the team, you will do 1 user testing every sprint. You will need a dedicated researcher because, between planning, recruiting, getting the testing, analyzing, and just keep the cadence of the sprint and the agile methodology, you can't really work on other projects. You need to have the researcher dedicated to this project. But if you have only 1 researcher in your organization, that means then you won't be able to have any other research done, technically. What will happen to the other 4 projects that need research? Or you will need to prioritize them based on the impact on the business and on the roadmap. But even if one of the projects is prioritized, how would you expect the researcher to take the extra workload? I can give you an example. One quarter, I had 32 research requests. And do you know how many researchers were available to take the new project? We had only 6 researchers available to take new projects. Tell me, how do you manage that? 32 research requests with 6 researchers available to take on new project. And every stakeholder put us under so much pressure to get their project taken care of. And they will use all the different routes to get their project a priority. This is why I started developing a prioritization process based on business objective, researcher availability based on their skill set, etc. Next season, I will dedicate an episode on the prioritization process. I realize that without a ruthless prioritization process, the workload of the user researcher is a massive component that affects directly UX researcher well-being. We all have so much to do at all different levels of seniority. The main issue that we experience is that the product team and design team do not always understand all the things, meaning tasks, that we have to do for each project. Sorry if I generalize a bit, but I know that some product team and product designer do understand a workload, task, and time it takes to perform a role. And I'm so grateful for those amazing stakeholders. But in some organizations where delivery is a priority, whether or not the product is meeting the user need, when designers think they can do a role by evaluating their own design with internal user, etc. Some stakeholders, and it's not their fault actually, just think that a role is just having a chatty chat with the users and putting some post-it on the wall. Actually, a role is much more complex than that. And I never said it enough. As user researcher, we use scientific research method, quantitative and qualitative, to understand user need and evaluate how people interact with their product. But to do so, we need to understand the product, understand stakeholders' needs, prepare the plan, recruit the participant, collect the data, analyze the data, extract the finding, create some deliverable, manage the data, etc., etc. This doesn't happen overnight. Even if you put it in a 2-week sprint, there is no room to breathe. For example, if you are doing a disco, meaning a discovery phase, I mentioned the different phases of the product development in episode 4, on which method to use and when and why. It may take to do a discovery up till 4 to 5 weeks. It may be a bit less, but if you haven't finished the ongoing research project or testing sprint, the UX researcher will start the planning of the next project, which means having 2 projects overlapping, which is very frequent. We all know that UX researchers are passionate about their work, and they will work extra hours to get insights as soon as possible. And we always put the extra time as we want to know the result. We get super excited when we start seeing some result and insights. I had a chat the other day with one of the attendees of the UX Crunch, and he said, over the weekend, I started extracting the finding from the data. And I asked, why over the weekend? And his answer was, oh, just because I love what I do. I think this will resonate to so many UX researchers. We really know what it meant. I also love what I do. This is also the excuse that I use until I got exhausted. And I can say, passion can be an issue. Several years ago, I was working at DWP on the Universal Credit before the release of the new platform. We had so much pressure to test all the different aspects of the platform. The research team was super small when I started this contract. I was doing it under my limited company back then. I was putting the process in place for research, try to integrate user research to the product development and to the agile teams. We were testing every 2 weeks, every sprint. We were doing 2-week sprint, and every 2 weeks we were testing different part of the platform, as well as mentoring a couple of civil servants who needed to have some knowledge of research and wanted to transition to user research. So as you can see, the research team was 2 civil servants in training and myself. Just imagine the workload to keep the cadence of doing the user testing, mentoring and supervising the 2 civil servants that I was training, plus all the other tasks of the user researcher, preparing the screener, managing the recruitment agency. We were using a lab, so managing the lab, the external lab, etc., having all the requests from the stakeholders to extract data, quantitative data as well. So I was working nonstop, really, really nonstop. But it was great. I really enjoyed what I was doing. But one day, I came home and I told my kids, then I was going to have a nap. I was super tired. I was exhausted. And guess what? I had a fever non-stop for 2 weeks. The doctor had to come home. I couldn't go to the surgery. The doctor came to visit me and said that I was very close to a burnout and my body was telling me to stop. It took me a while to recover. I lost so much weight and I was so tired. I couldn't get up. I couldn't leave my bed. I really stayed in bed for 2 full weeks. And I had a week to recover. Went back to work after 3 weeks because I was a contractor. If I was a full-time employee, probably I would be able to actually take extra time off. But I was not well, and that was terrible. I really, really learned my lesson that time. Thanks God, when I came back, we had new researcher, a new contractor starting, so I could really reduce workload. Managing stakeholder is also taking an important part of a role. Very often, stakeholders, I say very often because not all the time, I do appreciate and a lot of stakeholders too understand what we do, but also a majority, I would say, do not understand what we do. And we have to explain, because no one told them or they never had the experience to work with researchers before, so they don't know. There's nothing wrong about that. We just need to spend a lot of time to educate and to inform them of what is the role of the user researcher. There's a lot of misconception, thank you, designer, researcher, so we have to clarify very often of what we do. What are the processes? And we also need to reassure them that what we do is to support them to make the right decision by providing reliable and valid evidences coming from research. We work with product and delivery manager, designers and content designer, but also data scientists, service designer, and so many more. So we have to adapt our communication all the time to make sure our stakeholders understand what we are doing. This is leading to evangelization of UX research. This is what we do. We have to evangelize UX research constantly by explaining what we do and make people see the value of our work. This is exhausting. UX research perception. We are very often perceived as a little brother of design. Actually, we are equal to design. Why should we be the little brother or the little sister? There are also organization issues in which UX research is often reporting directly to design, which is sometimes a bit of a challenge. In the past, I was reporting to a design, and during the leadership meeting, I was the only researcher on the table with 5 designers at the same level as me. And of course, the main topic of conversation was about design, not research. Very often, researchers are not reporting to other researchers, and it is difficult. If you are the only researcher in your organization, you will automatically be reporting to design. We don't tend to speak the same language, and rare are the senior leadership designers who actually understand research. There is some, and I know some, and very good one, which I really appreciate. But I can see sometimes you've got leadership in design who actually don't really understand what we do or don't want to appreciate what we do. Also, very often, designers say that they can do a job. But, as I mentioned several times, research skill set are very different than design skill set. We don't have the same background. We don't use the same methods. A craft, if you want to call it a craft, are very different. I understand that you may not have the budget to hire a researcher, and in this case, I would say it is better for the designer to do the research than not doing any research. But designers sometimes overthink that they can do the research. Will a designer be happy if I was saying to them, oh, by the way, we don't need you as a designer, the researcher can do the better job? This is what we feel most of the time when a designer is saying to us they can do a job. Understand that some of them got some of the skill set. But the other issue, if you design a product and you test it, because generally it's doing user testing, how objective the designer with the skill set to do the research will be in evaluating their own product. How objective are they going to be in evaluating their own design? We spend so much time argumenting to make the stakeholder understand the value of what we do and to be neutral. Another point, which is taking a lot of our time, but also effort, managing participants. I'm not talking about the recruitment of the participant as mentioned in episode 5 and in episode 6 in season 1, dedicated on the participant recruitment. Recruiting participant, as I mentioned, is a full-time job, which is sometimes added to the user researcher task and workload. But another aspect that people tend to forget is managing the participants through the sessions, interview and user testing or during contextual inquiries, etc. The sessions with participants are tiring and require a lot of energy and attention while moderating the session. The researcher needs to pay attention to several things, to their script, but also to make sure the participant is providing relevant insight. Some participants require a lot of energy, especially when the participant is not proactive during the session, and required a lot of hand handling, as they may have issue with the prototype or the product, or if they are not very talkative. Researchers require a lot of empathy, calm, to manage the participant. Now, another point is the lack of recognition. Moving now to this point, which I have experienced a lot over the years. Less now, but early in my career, especially in organizations that have a lack of maturity related to UX research. In my book, Practical User Research and How to Integrate User Research to the Product Development, I explain the different level of maturity: business maturity, design maturity, user experience maturity, and UX research maturity. I invite you, if you can, to read the chapter. Any researcher reach out to me asking about the topic of the lack of recognition and trying to understand why. We do not gain the recognition we deserve. But before explaining the probable reason of lack of recognition, the effect of the lack of recognition directly affect the researchers. UX researchers very often feel that their effort and a contribution are not recognized despite all the hours and valuable insight provided. They don't even feel part of the team sometimes, which results to withdraw from interacting with certain people. unappreciated employees are twice as likely to experience poor mental health. Recognizing employee effort and contribution is very important for 58% of all the respondents of Giving Recognition big survey on Work Human Institute. Failing to appreciate and recognize UX researcher contribution and effort will affect employee retention, employee efficiency and productivity, poor collaboration among the employees, negativity and discord at the workplace, drop in the employer's brand and value. Recognizing the researcher work and effort helps to improving the engagement, motivation and commitment, sense of belonging, and produce and provide a better workplace culture. Why UX researchers are not always recognized and appreciated for their work? Many people in organizations do not value research, and they do not understand, then we are not designers. There is a misconception of a role and very often attached to the UX design job. As I keep saying, we are not designers. The role of the UX researcher is very different. In episode 7, I do an account of the role of the UX researcher. As you will be able to see, the task, the skill set, and the responsibility are very different from the designers. Researchers, on top of that, always need to be neutral, and they do not always bring good news to the product and design team. For example, one of my researchers was testing an MVP, and we tested it before it was supposed to be released to the clients. They didn't do the research before starting building the MVP. As a result, we could anticipate it that the MVP was not going to meet the user need. Anyway, this happened, and the product team do not always have the time to do the discovery or even regular testing through the development process. Anyway, we managed to screen a round of user testing before release. Just by playing around with the MVP, we could anticipate some issues. But once we tested it with users, the results were obvious. The MVP was not ready for release. I set up a meeting with the evidences with the product team to give them the news and provide a clear issue based on a severity scale to help them to prioritize the implementation of the findings. We put so much effort to squeeze the testing and to analyze the data in a Speedy Gonzales mode. And guess what? The product owner started blaming us. Then we could have done the research earlier and almost blaming us for the fact that the product was not working. Instead of seeing the feedback as a constructive and actually avoiding a premature release that will affect the brand. We also set up a meeting with the senior leadership to explain the situation, but in the end, they decided to release the MVP. This really affected the morale of the researcher. After all the efforts and the evidences, it seemed that their work was a waste of time. This really showed the lack of maturity and appreciation of what user research can bring on the table. Another thing as well, which happened, just imagine when you are the only one researcher in your organization, they very often feel isolated, not integrated into the design team, nor into the product team, which also affect their wellness. How do you expect a researcher to feel happy to go to work every day when they do not feel belonging to a team or even a company? So now, what can we do or what could you do to best support your UX researcher? The other day, one asked me how I can best support the new researcher that was going to be the first UX researcher into their team. So based on that, and also I'm talking about different things about a larger team, I'll give you some tips. There is much more, but this can help. I would say, before a new researcher starts, make sure that people in the team understand the role of the UX researcher. Where does the research role start? And when the cross-functional team members' role starts. This is very important to see where we fit as researcher. Don't assume that people know about UX research. Some people never worked with UX researcher in the past. That happened so many times in my career. Then I had to explain what we do. It was the first time they were working with a UX researcher. So don't assume that people know about UX research. Also, it is always super good to do a quick presentation of what the UX researcher will do and why. it is important to take on board their insights. See the researcher as an equal to you, not as a subcategory. Do not underestimate the skills required to conduct a good, reliable, and valid research. It requires a lot of knowledge, by the way. Invite them for lunch and learn, stand up, meeting. Invite your researcher to spend time with you, with your product team, with your design team. It's very important. The researcher is always going to be there to learn about your product, learn about your design, but they may have another pair of eyes and they will see things that you probably won't see. If you have a bigger team, build a community. It is very important. Have lunch with your researcher. The researcher can meet up, exchange about projects, support each other, have another pair of eyes on the analysis. It is very good. I always have lunch with my team, and I think it's great. Maybe not every day during the week, but at least once a week, we all eat together. We just go and grab some food and just eat, take a table and all eat together. We all have a good chatty chat, but we talk about so many different things, and it's nice to feel that we belong somewhere. If you don't have other researcher in your organization and you are the only one, I will recommend that you reach out to the UX communities. There's many online that you can reach out and ask questions. And you can also try to meet people in some social event. That's why actually we started to do the user research social in London. But I invite other researchers in other locations to start creating an after-work UX research social. It doesn't have to be in London. You can be anywhere around the world. If you are more than 2 in the community, your community is starting. So just take the initiative. Try to find other researchers in your city and meet up for drinks every quarter, every 2 months, or whenever you want. I think this is great. Create a safe environment for the researcher to actually present their finding and also to discuss findings. As a head of research, I always create a safe environment for my team to actually discuss findings. And it's very important for them actually to actually be able to express themselves. The other thing is also create a safe environment for people to present the findings. And if you do a presentation, just don't send one researcher on their own. I always have someone, a lead researcher present, a senior researcher present, or even myself. If it's a very complex project or there will be a bit of tension, I try to attend to support my researcher during the presentation. Give them time to reflect. Because as you can see, all the tasks and the responsibility, we never stop. It's one task after the next, and it's never stops. It's very good to set some time for them to breathe. So regularly, I try to organize a UX research day in which the researcher can spend time together. It's like workshop. We work on methodology. We work on stuff we want to do about research, how to improve our process or whatever. But it's time to be a bit more casual about the research capacity. Always allow them to have a bit of time. It's not always possible, but I will really recommend to allow some away day or things like that. Do not overload the researcher with too many research requests. If you need more research, hire more researcher. You can't just keep putting on more and more and more research on top of the list of all the backlog we already have. Support them. Just show appreciation of what they do and thank them for all the research they've done. I think it's great. People really appreciate a little thank you. Do not diminish what we are doing, thinking that you could do it yourself. Or that you already know the answer. Actually, sometimes some of the findings, you probably knew the result already. You had those assumptions. But be grateful. Actually, we validated your assumption with valid and reliable results. And at the end, I would say, be nice to your researcher, because sometimes I see some people being very rude. Another thing as well you can do is just come and watch some user testing session or some interviews or spend time with the researcher. Try to understand and discuss, casually what they've been doing. That is very nice, actually. So now, to conclude this episode, I would like to give you some exercise that may help you to relieve some of the stress and the overwhelming aspect of your job as a UX researcher. So it's going to be 6 different exercises, and you can do them anytime during the day. So one is to do some deep breathing, and it's a good way to reduce the stress. So you could do deep breathing for 1 minute, and that just after you will feel much better. The second one is to close your eyes for 60 seconds and imagine yourself in a calm and relaxing environment. I don't know, by the mountain, in the countryside, by the fire, on the beach, whatever. Just 60 seconds. Close your eyes and start thinking of something which is nice and calm and you feel good about. So now, some mindfulness. So think of 5 things that you can see right now. So now, think of 4 things that you can hear. And now think of 3 things that you can touch. And now think of 2 things that you can smell. And then 1 thing that you can taste. This is quite good actually. Just put you back directly in the present situation. It removes the stress very quickly. So 4th, write down 3 things that you achieved today. It could be work-related or it could be personal, doesn't matter. But just write down 3 things that you achieve today. 5, stand up, stretch, and walk around. Try to do that several times during the day. It is very important. We are sitting down a lot at the moment. So try to stand up, to stretch, and to walk around. And 6, engage with people. Do not hesitate to ask for help or to have a chat at the coffee machine or to speak with people in the elevator or in the lift. No, just try to engage with people. I hope you find those exercises helpful. So, to summarize today's episode, we presented some numbers which were related to the UX researcher well-being. We discussed the different reasons why UX researchers are struggling, which involve workload, stakeholders management, lack of recognition, isolation, etc. I provided you some tips to facilitate the integration of your only researcher or to the entire research capability into your team or organization. And finally, I share with you some exercise that could help UX researcher, but also anyone who feel overwhelmed at work. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode today, and if you have any question or a topic you would like me to cover, you can contact me on info@uxresearchclub.com. You can also find a lot of information about user research by reading my book, Practical User Research, which covers how to integrate user research into your product development. Detail will be in the description of this podcast. And finally, if you want to support the UX Research Club, please share it with your network on social media, or please write a review or give me some stars. I'll see you next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening, and goodbye.